Good morning, everybody. We are gonna give everybody just a few minutes. It's 10 o'clock. We'll give everybody about a minute to log on and get situated before we get started on today's webinar. Wonderful. I'm seeing some familiar faces come through the chat. I'm so happy to have everybody here today. Um, If you don't mind, we would love to start this off while we're waiting for everybody to join with a question for you all. And if you could, go ahead and put in the chat your favorite palm tree. Since today's talk is going to be about palm tree management, let's see what your favorites are out there. And Dr. McMillan, you can see from different areas in the state, we're getting pretty good coverage around the state and lots of different palms coming through, foxtail, bismal. Um, those are fun. Okay. All right. Well, it's 10:02. I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. I want to thank everybody for being here today. My name is Claire Lewis. I'm the director of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And we are here today for an update on palm tree management with Dr. Mica McMillan. We're going to have a great presentation today. Your microphones, you may have noticed, have been muted. We'll be closing out the chat feature in just a few minutes during the presentation. So please put any questions you have for Dr. McMillan in the Q&A chat box, and we'll take them at the end of the presentation. Also want to let everybody know this webinar is approved for one CEU, for FFLCP, for LIAF, for FDAX, LF, LC, LM, LLO, and CLO, DBPR for landscape architects and community association managers, for ISA, and for FNGLA. So while the webinar is free, there is a $15 administration fee for the CEU. So if you would like that CEU, we'll put a chat or link in the chat box so that you can register if you haven't already. We will be submitting the CEUs to the licensing agency on Friday. So make sure if you do want that CEU to go ahead and register and make payment by the end of the day. And this webinar is part of a monthly webinar series held on the second Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. Our next scheduled webinar will be September 8th with Dr. Adam Dale, who will be speaking on landscape pests. So be sure to make it for that one. That's sure to be a good one. And right now, what I would like to do is let you know that we will be having a survey. It's a brief 4-question survey, and we'd really appreciate it if you would answer it and give us your input. It is on the survey supports our horticultural specialist, Kaylee Graves, who's conducting research for her master's thesis. And this survey is on how different audiences engage with educational technology and resources. Your feedback will help guide future outreach, education, and teaching development efforts. So if you don't mind, please take the time to fill out that survey. Be sure to scroll down to the bottom of it because there are 4 questions and you kind of have to scroll to the bottom to get that last question. And with that, I will turn this over to Jessica Moore to introduce today's speaker. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jessica, and I am part of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program as well. And it's my pleasure today to introduce Dr. McMillan. Dr. Mica McMillan is the Assistant Professor for Palm Horticulture at the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. She's worked as a researcher in the agricultural, turfgrass, and media industries focused on developing chemistries to improve plant and soil health. Her research focuses on establishment process of palms and ornamentals in different environmental and soil conditions. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Mica.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, ladies, very much for the invite. I appreciate it. I'll rely on you, ladies, to help me figure out if you can hear me. Are we all good? Jessica, you can hear me? Awesome. Okay. So we're going to get started today. I am going to move rather quickly Let's see, there we go. So today we're going to hit on some of those very, very important FFL principles. And right now we're going to go with focusing on right plant, right place. So apropos post freeze this year. Fertilize appropriately. We're going to talk a little bit about wildlife, pest, and of course, recycling yard waste and protecting the waterfront. All of this can be incorporated into this presentation. So I always like to start off a talk with palms as how important are they? So I'm putting together with one of my graduate students, not only how economically important palms are to the world, but also from a cultural standpoint. And most people don't think of palms here in Florida. They think, of course, of the landscape importance, but of course, we know that oil palm, which happens to be probably about 50% of American products that are on the grocery store shelves. And then, of course, coconut, we're all very familiar with, and then the date palm. There is estimates that the date palm will become extremely important as we move away from artificial sugars. The date palm seems to fill that natural sugar, so we expect to see date palm production to increase significantly. But in Florida, this is hard to kind of nail down, but we do know Florida is the leading producer of landscape palms. And then, of course, we can see how it contributes just to the landscape industry in general with 14.3 billion direct sales, so to speak. Now, I'm going to go over this really quickly. So for those of you who have seen my presentations, I'm just going to touch base on like what are our normal deficiencies. And the number one deficiency here is in Florida and globally is going to be potassium deficiencies on palms. How do you know it's potassium? Because potassium always happens on the lower fronds. And you can see as you hold that frond up into the sky and the sun is coming through, you can see the orange and yellow speckling. You'll get leaf tip necrosis. So you could almost touch it and it's very brittle. Sometimes the leaves at the end will curl. And what leads to the potassium deficiencies is high nitrogen fertilizer, because nitrogen will kick off potassium in the cation exchange sites. So this is what it looks like. Another great way to tell with potassium deficiency, particularly on royals, if you look at a royal or some of these very tall palms and they start to do what we call pencil pointing. So if they pencil point, towards their trunk, like you can see here in this picture with the red arrow, that certainly means that your palm is experiencing potassium deficiency. If you've ever seen palms go in and out, not necessarily always potassium, could be environmental effects. But for us at the crown tip point, if you start to see potassium deficiency from the stem, then you know that is potassium deficiency. Manganese. We'll get into a little bit more about how important manganese is because palms can die from manganese deficiency. But right now, manganese also a very important one, particularly for folks who are up in North Florida. When you go through these cold soil temperature environments during your winter, we tend to see where manganese gets bound up. But if you know manganese deficiency, you're going to recognize it from the frizzle top, or what we call frizzle top. And it always happens at the base of the first frond. So you might see where that frond, as it gets older, moves down. But if you're really paying attention to your palms and in your palm production, and you start to see where manganese is a problem at that first frond, then you definitely should fertilize. Like we said, most severe at the base and first frond. And of course, also that frond drops off. You can see the longitudinal black streaking on the palm leaves. What is manganese caused by, deficiency caused by high soil pHs and cold weather? We'll go over a little bit more about that. Magnesium, prevalent, very prevalent down here in South Florida, all over the state of Florida, particularly on the Phoenix species, whether it's the Festers, Canariensis, the Robilinis. The magnesium, even some of your cycads, magnesium deficiency, bright yellow on the ends and then green through the middle. Typically happens, or you can see it prevalently from the mid to older canopy. And sometimes it can intermingle with potassium deficiency. So here we see that bright green, and then on the ends is that orange, bright yellow tips or edges of that frond. If you look to the right, you can see where at the tips, that'd be your left, on your left, you can see where the tips have become necrotic. That is definitely potassium. So potassium and magnesium can definitely intermingle on the same frond. Boron deficiency. How I remember it is Dr. Seuss, because your palm always looks a little crazy, a little funky. So boron deficiencies, you're going to see it right off because it occurs on the new leaves. And that's where you get that scrunched up accordion leaf look to it, or the inverted truncation where it kind of looks like an upside down frond. Prevalently in South Florida and throughout the state, I really notice boron deficiency when we have multiple unopened spear leaves. In this picture, you can see number one, the accordion leaves, the necrotic inflorescence, which is definitely a boron deficiency indicator, and also the palm is kind of leaning to the left. So we know that's gravitropism, and that's a great indication of boron deficiency. Boron's a kicker, though, because boron deficiency, boron will get tied up in the soil when it's dry, so the plant can't take it up, or during our rainy season, it will leach through the soil profile. So it's a very difficult deficiency to correct for, and you'll see sometimes palms just go in and out, in and out, in and out of the boron deficiency. So again, very prevalent. I like this one because, oh, here's your unopened spear leaves. People notice this one a lot because the palms look off or a little funny with the unopened spear leaves. So we do get quite a few pictures from homeowners regarding this deficiency. I didn't start off, folks, with nitrogen, right? Because, in any fertilizer class you've taken, fertility class, you know that they always start off with nitrogen because it tends to be the most noticeable, and typically the most important. But in landscape palms, we very rarely see nitrogen deficiency. This is a great example of nitrogen deficiency. But again, and this is not a solitary palm. This is a foxtail palm. But what we know about nitrogen deficiency tends to occur in container palms. It doesn't mean when I say that we don't see it as prevalently. We do see it in container palms because the microbes do eat up that nitrogen. But in the landscape, not are normally our number one deficiency. So again, very rare. So fertilization of palms for common nutrient deficiencies, potassium, magnesium, manganese, and boron. We're not correcting when we fertilize for these deficiencies because these deficiencies will actually require the whole entire canopy replacement. This is the number one point that many of my homeowners, master gardeners, and people who have moved into Florida don't understand, is that they think, oh, we fertilized, and so that potassium deficiency, the green striking with the stripes through the fronds with the magnesium deficiency, the frizzle top with the manganese will be corrected. It will not. So we have to wait for that full canopy replacement, and it could take months, sometimes up to 2 years if it's very severe. So we want to prevent the over application of fertilizer by understanding, number one, that concept and knowing how we can prevent these deficiencies in the first place. Because fertilization in palms is targeted at the new leaves developing in the bud and the emerging leaves. So how do we fertilize palms? The UF IFAS recommendation for fertilization of palms is 1.5 pounds of an 8-2-12-4 per 100 square feet. So I train a lot of people on what 100 square feet is. You walk 10 feet out and 10 feet north and south, 10 feet east and west. And that's your 10 square feet or your 100 square feet, sorry. And you're fertilizing with the 8-2-12-4 by nicely and gently walking around that palm. And typically 1.5 pounds of a palm special fertilizer is about a Campbell, maybe a little bit better, maybe Progresso soup can. So you take that soup can, you walk nice and evenly around and under the fronds, and you fertilize the palms. We require that you fertilize 3 to 4 months out of the year. Do not fertilize during our rainy season. So again, a lot of our counties are in a blackout period. So between June 1st and September 30th, I even extended to November 1st. We do not fertilize palms with nitrogen and phosphorus. Remember, I said nitrogen and phosphorus, so more to come on that. But again, 3 to 4 months out of the year, meaning this is what we do. We fertilize in November. As soon as we come out of the rainy season, we'll hit them in January, March, and then once again right before we go into the fertilizer blackout period. So in June. So that's 4 times. If they don't need it as much, then just do 3. Um, this is tough for palms because palms are most actively growing when it's warm. So from that May period through, September, which is number one our rainy season, but unfortunately when our palms are most actively growing. So we like to get in those 3 applications at least of fertilization. This prevents these deficiencies. So like I said, we call it an 8-2-12-4. You will see this in the box stores as Palm Special. And typically it follows this 8-2-12-4. There's some variance between, depending on, which fertilizer blend you're looking at. If you have a question, you can certainly email me or your extension agents, and we'll say, yes, that one will work just as well. But typically, if it's labeled with Palm Special, then for the most part, 9 times out of 10, what I've seen is it works and it's good. So 1.5 pounds, 3 to 4 applications outside the rainy season, and of course, in a preventative management practice. Do not do this. We see it all the time, and I know why people do it, but at the same time, we don't want to just go ahead and dump all this fertilizer right around the base of these palms. So we do a nice even palm distribution around these palms, spreading that fertilizer out, because you put out this much fertilizer around the base of a palm, it can certainly make it phytotoxic, or not phytotoxic, toxic to the palm and the stems. So don't do this. Now, I went over how to do the 8-2-12-4, but I get this question quite a bit on how to fertilize for boron deficiencies. This is very important. Apply to 2 to 4 ounces soluble borax in 5 gallons of water. I did not say 1. I did not say 2. I said 5 gallons of water, because boron, soluble boron, borax, they need a lot of water. And if you do it in less, like say, I've had people do this. I've done it myself. But we put in a tablespoon of soluble borax. We dump it into a gallon of water. We shake it up, and then we pour it around the palm. And you can definitely see where that is creating a much more larger volume of water, so the palm does not die. Because if you're too toxic or too high with that boron rate, then what will happen is it'll create a toxic environment, and the palm and all the landscape plants around it will die. So again, I caution everybody to be very, very, remember this, 5 gallons of water, okay? So, what are the problems with palms in Florida? Why do we have so many nutrient deficiencies? Is it easy as I'm telling you? It's 1.5 pounds, 3 to 4 years, no problemo, right? No. Why? Because in Florida, how do we fertilize palms that are near waterways? Okay, this is a big one. We are surrounded by environmentally sensitive areas, our oceans, our waterways, our canals, our lakes. So again, how do you fertilize palms that are right up on the waterway? How do you fertilize these palms in small spaces? And again, this is a trial that we ran here with Adenidia in South Florida. Look at all basically the hard limestone, these big rocks, very, very dry. So what's interesting for me is um, we'll run irrigation cycles, and we'll put out we'll get a ton of rainfall, and the rainfall will just come down in 3-4 inches at once. But within 3 hours, we're right back to a 0 to 10% in these sand soils. We have little organic matter. So this is why we have a difficult time fertilizing palms and maintaining the fertilizer in the palms, because when you transplant palms and you put them in, you need the roots to grow, and roots don't grow without that water. Also, the nutrients that need to be transported in the water to reach the roots. People are fertilizing palms, but far away from the palms where there's no roots, or the fertilizer gets bound up in our high alkaline soils. So again, lots of issues with fertilizing palms in Florida. So a few years ago, FNGLA, thank you, FNGLA, and ArborJet were nice enough to fund a research trial where we were looking at injection. And this trial was foxtails palm, or Wydidea bifurcata. They have become extremely popular from South Florida. I've been seeing them all the way up into near places north of Orlando. People just love these palms. They're beautiful. It looks like a foxtail. But we chose this one because they tend to be very nutrient deficient in the landscape. But we are injecting once a year. We are putting out 8, 2, 12, 4 3 times a year. And then we are doing a 0, 0, 22 plus 4 magnesium 3 times a year. And then of course the control. And we are specifically focused on in this trial, because palms can get very tall, we are looking at using drones. So when we started the research trial, don't get crazy looking at the reds and the oranges and everything. There was not a lot of variability. All of the palms looked great. They were above a 0.785 to a 0.9 NDVI, and that's what the drone is capturing for us, NDVI, which is a measure of how green the palms are. And of course, we want to see these palms 0.75 or above, to 0.9 all the way to 1, because that tells us that the palm is doing well and it looks really good. So this was captured right when we started, before we started the trial. And then a few months later, I shouldn't say a few months, that was a year, 16 months going into the research trial, the foxtails got hit with anthracnose. And thank goodness I have Dr. Dillon here, because he was able to diagnose it for me. And as the palm pathologist, and he told me, hey, Micah, it's anthracnose. And this is what anthracnose looks like on palms, where the crown shaft turns brown and then the palm dies. So we lost a lot of palms. The fronds are turning brown. And of course, this is exactly what it looks like. You can see the brown crown shaft, and it's different from when a frond is just falling off. It's like this light brown color. So I can now visually tell whenever it's anthracnose in the field. And of course, all my NDVIs just plummeted down to 0.292. That's a dead palm, essentially. But we still had some that were 0.785 and 0.903, and looking pretty good. Some of those were ranging from 0.7 all the way up to 0.9. If you will take a look at my diagram here, and you'll see a line of 3. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you'll see a line of 3 palms, palm up here, and then we've got a couple over here that are looking pretty good. Well, those were injection treatments. So we definitely saw where the injection was able to withstand that anthracnose. And our mortality data, I lost half of my palms, but we found that with the injection, we lost significantly less palms than when compared to the Czech Palm Special or just the Sol Mag. And the Sol Mag was that 0, 0, 22 plus 4. So in palms that were not treated with injection and just the Palm Special and Sol Mag, look right here, you can see that's manganese deficiency right through there. Okay, so we just showed you what manganese deficiency looks like. We can see where injected palms, these are my injected palms to the left. You see this bright, beautiful green. This is my top dog. He looks gorgeous, dark green, beautiful. And those are what my injected palms look like. We stopped the trial when we lost half of them. So again, thank you to FNGLA for funding this trial. But what I found interesting, I said, let's go ahead. We still have enough for replication. For those that did not receive the injection initially, let's go ahead and inject them, see if they will recover. And if you look here to the right, this is an untreated, and then we injected, and we do see some recovery with injection. So overall recovery looked really good. These are all the palms now. Then we went ahead and injected all of them, and we did get recovery from anthracnose and some other nutrient deficiencies with injection. Now, when I started this job 5 years ago, I had a lot of people telling me injection is not great. We put a hole in the palm. Palms do not heal from a hole. They are not dicots. Palms are monocots, and so they do not have the ability to basically heal over when you put a hole in them. So I've injected hundreds of palms now, and I have yet to have a port failure, meaning when we inject, we drill into the palm, and then we tap in the port. Then we inject using the pressurized injection system, and then we basically walk away from it. For in this trial, it was a year. This is the first port failure I've had. And so this gives me an indication that there's a lot more things going on in these palms, whether it's a vascular system failure or something else. But like I said, I've injected starting off 5 years ago, and I can tell you that this is my first port failure. So it does happen. You can see the injection port is sinking into the trunk. And right now, we're still learning a lot about injection, but in this trial, the injection did work in foxtails. So a few 30 years ago, Dr. Elliott and Dr. Brochat, my predecessors, they did some works on Phoenix robelinis. These robelinis are still here at the research station, and you can see where they injected 30 years ago, the Phoenix look great. They are still beautiful palms. They're actually tall Phoenix robelinis. And you can see where they had injected using old systems that, you were holding the bag with a fungicide. They were injecting a fungicide, but you can see it did create a hole. And but yet these palms still survived. So this is just one of many stories I've heard from people across the state where palms have huge holes in them and they still look great. So we definitely, here's my biologist putting her hand through that trunk so you can see we've severed that vascular system, but the palm looks great. So in 2022, when I started here, we were looking at 50% of those surveyed would not inject a palm. But now in 2025, when I did a whole bunch of surveys for every palm short course or talk I gave, 94% of those surveyed would give injection a try. And I will repeat this. This injection study is as one of many that we're conducting right now. We're exploring how many times you have to inject, what we're injecting with, things like that. We're trying to address all the questions that everybody has about the injection. Injection for me, if you can fertilize using a granular product, if you can fertilize, foliarly and the palm responds, great. But the system that we use is approximately $5,000. So you as a homeowner and perhaps as a landscaper are not going to go out and just inject on your own unless you're willing to spend it might even be more expensive now, $5,000. So it is an option if you find that fertilization or you're near a waterway or palms are in small spaces or they're just not responding to your fertilizer applications, injection may be an option for you. And by the way, they are injecting the OTC antibiotic in for control of or a prevention of lethal bronzing. We also do a lot of injection into, for potentially for other diseases as well. So we're exploring other opportunities with injections and palms. But our conclusion in this study was that we definitely need more research, particularly on its ability to withstand disease outbreak. I thought that was intriguing, and I have a couple ideas why, but really, really need to explore some more of that. And then, of course, we have the 0022 applications did not perform as well. The 0022 plus 4 and the 8212 plus 4 fertilizer applications did not do as well. And then we will continue to explore this as an option for our stakeholders. Now, remember I told you I would cover, some of our wildlife. I believe it's an American kestrel. I'm a bit of a birder. And this American kestrel flies all over the research station, and he loves these foxtails. And this is where he perches. So that's a check on my FFL principles. I hit one of those, right? So birds love our palms. So we want to keep our palms happy. Next study. So this one is using drone imagery to evaluate palm health. Again, funded by FNGLA. Thank you, FNGLA. So this was looking at 6 different treatments. I'm going to lay them out for you here. 8212-4, which is our palm special, which is always in our trials as our baseline. And then, of course, we have a palm jet and phosphojet apical meristem drench. So we were taking the material that we inject with, and the last trial, I'm sorry, I don't think I said that we inject it with palm jet. So this is a nutrient formula that was designed for palms. So palm jet is just your standard nutrient application that you're injecting with. And then they also have a material called phosphojet that, it has some plant health benefits. But we're doing an apical meristem drench. So what that means is from the top of the palm, we know palms have one apical meristem. And if you damage or wound that palm, the bud or the heart of the palm or the apical meristem, then we know the palm will more than likely die. So what we were doing is we were pouring this Phosphojet and Palm Jet, 5 mLs, and we were just drenching around the bud just to see what would happen from the top. And then we were also injecting both materials at the bottom of these Adenidias. We chose Adenidia myrtle or Christmas palms. Another treatment was control. Another one was the Solpulmag 0022 plus 4, and then a gator grip. Starting off, these are my drone numbers, and you can see we have one palm that's not looking so great, but we did rep based on some of these NDVIs. So we covered our bases for statistics. What is the gator grip? So the gator grip is something that was designed by me and my biologist using a biodegradable palm fertilizer scrunchie is what we're calling it. We called it the gator grip because we're here at Florida. Now this and it's not a scrunchie. It's a way that we had to explain it to the patent people and so they could get it. But what we did is we took this biodegradable material, we made it flexible so it could expand around the spear leaf, and you fill it full of different materials. In this one, we use fertilizer, and because we were making a comparison between 8-2-12-4 on the ground, we put 8-2-12-4 in this pocket, and then we tied it up and we placed it around the spear leaf. The reason why we designed this is because number one, we wanted to see if we could feed palms from the top with slow release fertilizer particularly during the rainy season. Why? Because you can't and shouldn't fertilize during the rainy season in some of our counties or near waterways. So during the rainy season, this is an opportunity for you to fertilize from the top because we believe that it's a foliar uptake. Some of it may run over into the roots, but we haven't seen any phytotoxicity or anything, and it's worked very well. It also takes the guesswork out of the application math. I don't have to go around explaining 10 by 10. And when arborists go up to prune a palm, they can go ahead and just stick one on the spear leaf. So again, set it and forget it, but this is what the gator grip is. We also used it here, like I showed you previously on the in this trial, we were looking at Adenidia, a very popular palm down here as well, gorgeous palm. Because this is a very drouthy area. We have no irrigation set up. Our watering practices are nil. We put them in and then we left them. So rainfall, and then when it got so dry, we had to go out with a hose and water them so we didn't lose the whole trial. But from our standpoint, we know that as long as you have that gator grip on the top, and when you get rainfall or overhead irrigation, that fertilizer, you will fertilize the tree. Whereas from the bottom, you can see how dry that soil is. And because of our high alkaline soils, some of these nutrients are bound up. And we need the water from irrigation or rainfall to disperse or transport these nutrients. And on new transplants, remember this, on new transplants, your roots aren't out here, spread 20 feet wide. Your roots are within that container initially and for some months. So just looking at canopy cover using drones, this is how we evaluate percent cover. It lets us know how the plant health is. So again, we are seeing statistically significant differences. But what was intriguing for us as we looked at root growth and Christmas palms, you have root count on the left, total root length on the right. And what we found is that the Palm Special was significantly higher, almost twice as much when compared to all of whether it was injection, the apical meristem drenches, or the slow release fertilizers on the ground. Root count was greater and total root length. So this is very interesting for us because we think it's just a spoon feeding, like they do in turf, spoon feeding fertilizer for our palms, where we're just giving a little bit at a time every time it rains or you irrigate. In this trial, we did have significant from the injection point. You can see my injection port right there. We did have a concave stem. Now, I believe this happened because these palms were extremely dry. Remember, I was tough on these ones. And then listen, the Adenity held up like a dream. But even the best drought tolerant palms were failing because we just had no water. And this is what typically happens in Florida, right? Where the irrigation system breaks or we walk away from plants and this is what happens. So for us, I believe this was because the vascular system was actually degrading. We saw this in palms that also weren't injected as well, but note the concave trunk, that is something that may happen in palms after injection. So unsightly for sure, but all of the treatments did better than the control. So there's something to that. Now, we get asked this question all the time regarding like, where do we inject on a palm if you're going to inject? And for those of you who are keeping this presentation in the back of your head, what we know is that you can inject at the base, the crown, or the stem. So the base of the palm is where you're going to be standing, or you're going to be kneeling down and injecting above the flare. Then you have the stem, which is pretty much at uh, you know waist height, and then crown, which do not inject into the apical meristem. Um, you don't ever want to do that. You'll kill the apical meristem. But uh, what we did is we injected right towards the top, kind of like below the crown shaft. So we did see where our SPAD index, or a SPAD index for us is a little machine that takes a look at chlorophyll. Normally, visually, we can see it's greener, but everybody has a different idea of what green is. So we use SPAD, or this little machine that tells us what the SPAD numbers are. So the higher SPAD numbers indicates for us that the nutrients were taken up. We also do nutritional analysis, but this is an easy one for growers, landscapers, etc., if they wanted to look at green values. But we did see where the higher you inject, significantly higher when compared to the base. So that is something that intrigues us, and we're exploring it more. But this was a trial that we ran on the Adenidias, and we did see that this is a separate trial from the one I was just talking about. But we do see where you inject does make a difference. Now, because I'm talking to you about the Gator Grip, we are exploring, we have many trials out with the Gator Grip, some ideas that we have regarding what can be put into it. But on the left, you see a conventional surface application of your standard 8212. Note how it's not as green. The palm, looks good, but you can see it's frayed a little bit around the edges. There are some nutritional things that are oncoming. But on the right is your Gator Grip, which was filled with the Harrell's 11411. So Harold's is exploring this as well. But we had dropped and these are small enough for us to go ahead and just put that Gator Grip around the spear leaf for establishment, because look, my soils, I have no organic matter around my soils, in what I call my fertilizer field. So there's no organic matter, and the nutrients, whether we're applying surface application, they're just moving off or leaching through, or not accessible to that newly transplanted palm. But we did see where the green up was significantly higher with the Gator Grip. So there is something to that up top foliar application. Here's what it looks like, the bag, and it's filled with foliar fertilizers. Slow release fertilizers. And then, of course, here is just a close up of where we just see greener color. And we're exploring how these applications can work for rooting, plant health, etc. Now, moving into cold weather events. This was a doozy this year. I was swamped, from February, Josh, all the way until April. It was just crazy. We did have a significant freeze for all of us who were here during that significant freeze. But here's my FFL principle coming out again. Right palm, right place, folks. But I love my palm lovers. So people want what they want. But if you're looking for hardy, cold tolerant palm trees, we absolutely have a plethora of palms that do very well, and are hardy and cold tolerant. We do have an EDIS publication where where some of these palms, if you're looking for some that would work well for further north, the date palm, needle palm, and of course some of these are natives, so that's always good. But there are other options. What we recommend before freeze is you want to fertilize your palms. If you know a week before, which we typically do, right? We know it's going to get cold. I would probably go out and give a nice fertilization if you're not on a preventative management practice. Then yes, I would fertilize your palms before we go into a cold weather event. I don't mean the day of, I don't mean the day before. I mean like a week before. Get them something out there so they can take that up. Particularly potassium. And then, of course, you want to irrigate. We do not want these palms to be drought stressed before we go into a freeze. It will just crumble the palm. And like I said, right palm, right place. And then if you can, um, a lot of people were throwing blankets over some of their palms, if they could, of course. But typically, if you know it's a palm and you live further north and you know it's a palm that is not cold tolerant, you want to make sure you plant it in an area that's kind of buffered from the winds. Because I think further north of us, like in Fort Pierce area, they really got hit with some hard winds and it just crumbled palms. So if you love your palms and it's not cold tolerant, try to buffer it from the wind by putting it, somewhere near a building or something like that. After the cold weather event, what you're looking for is the new spear leaf. If you see a spear leaf coming up and it looks green and great, wonderful, your palm has probably survived. We're going to tend to see boron and manganese deficiencies at the top for the first one or two new spear leaves. As they open up, they might exhibit these deficiencies. Like I said, fertilize, keep them happy. But as long as you're seeing that spear leaf, great. If you're not seeing a spear leaf, then we have other options that can be explored. But right around the time of June, so we got hit in February, so February, March, April, May, right around May, June, if your palm is still putting out a spear leaf, but it's just looking like the fronds are falling a little bit, it means probably the vascular system got hit really pretty hard. And then in June and July, you're going to start to see where these palms either just fall over or the fronds just completely drop and the palm dies, the head drops. So that's where you're looking for. If you're putting out new spear leaves, that's a really great indication. But sometimes they're still putting out spear leaves and then they just fall over. It's because their vascular system froze so bad that it was an issue. So again, these are the things that you look for after a cold weather event. And I'm going to cover manganese right now because manganese is so important for a palm. A palm can die from these manganese deficiencies. And so going into a cold weather event, we want to make sure absolutely that you've been fertilizing, but sometimes you will get that manganese deficiency. And these are the reasons why manganese is important: photosynthesis, enzyme activation, chlorophyll production, nitrogen metabolism, and disease resistance. So a lot of times when your palms get hit, by a freeze, you can see that they tend to be more susceptible to diseases. Now, here we went over this, what manganese deficiency looks like. But manganese deficiency is very common here in Florida because we have high pH soils, alkaline soils. What does that mean? So if you look at your plant nutrient availability chart, you see here manganese is in the orange, and we have manganese is more available in 5.5 and 6. And actually, in some other places in the world where it have acidic soils, manganese toxicity is actually an issue. But here in South Florida and Florida in general, you're going to see where manganese is just not available at these high pH soils. So we have, number one, already a problem because we have high pH soils. This year, because of our cold temperatures, it reduced the root activity and the microbial activity. So we're not seeing as much uptake of manganese. And this has been well studied by, I believe it was Dr. Broshot and Dr. Hodel. So also we have compacted soils. So if you think your soils are compacted, and we have, limestone or hard pan soils, calcium carbonate, and when these soils wet up, that's great. But then they dry down and they harden, hard as concrete. And then, so they get compacted. And your soils are compacted and there's a real issues with root uptake when you start to see manganese. So good indication knowing if you've ever wondered, are my soils compacted? If you start to see a lot of manganese deficiency, it could be because you have compacted soils. So like I said, this year, look at my graph right here. Starting November, it got a little cold, but right when January and February hit, we hit a low right here of about 36 degrees. Got very cold here in South Florida, 40 a few weeks later. And the kicker this year was we got hit once pretty bad. And then a few weeks later, we got hit again. Not as bad, but it was two kickers in a row. So the plant starts to flush again, and then we get another cold weather event. So those are my temperatures. Now, what happened here in South Florida? You can see in South Florida, number one, we dropped down to, we're here in Davie, so we dropped down to 35, not quite freezing, but very cold temps, enough to kill this pest. And so this is another one of my Florida-friendly practices. When these guys fall here at the research station, we pick them up by their tail, and as soon as they're like this, because they eat everything down here. My canaf studies, all of my ornamentals, we have to be careful with these iguanas. They're so crazy down here right now. As soon as they start falling like this, you pick them up, get them out of here. And so this is what happens. So we know what happens with iguanas, but what happens with your palms? These are Phoenix robellini to your left. They were planted up in Yalaha. You can see the tiff burn, and just now in June, they're just starting to come out of it. So those fronds have come down to the end and they're starting to flush. But this is what happens. And it takes 6, 7 months for that to go away. So a lot of people ask me, do I trim that off, Micah? If you can reach it, doesn't hurt to trim off the brown stuff that's dead, but I don't recommend it. I just let it fall. And don't take off those fronds because we need them for photosynthesis. So just let the palm do what it's naturally going to do. I know it's unsightly, but let it fall down. And then 5, 6 months later down the road, this is good. Other palms just don't do well up in the Orlando area and further north. Here's a trial that we're looking at coconuts. Our coconuts got really kicked back here at 35 degrees, not even freezing, they got kicked. So on the right, these are trials that we were doing that were on the black cloth. And you can see where they absolutely took a hit. All the brown fronds, excuse me, and then they just were drooping and still didn't quite recover. On the left, those are ones that we kept in the shade house. Kept in the greenhouse, and we brought them out just to show you the differences. Adenidia murilli, one of my favorite trees. I have yet to kill this one, but excuse me, in a freeze, they did not do well. And so these palms are not freeze tolerant. So I have seen them creep up to Orlando and they took a hit. So try to keep them really quite south of Orlando. And I'll tell you, this was in Fort Pierce, so we know even Fort Pierce isn't good. So here's an email that I got. This is Bill. You see his Chinese fan palm. It looks like a Chinese fan palm to him. Bill is a palm aficionado. Bill is from Michigan. He lives in Michigan, folks. So I was looking at this guy. There's no way. And because he's such a lover, he puts this palm in a tent and puts heating lights on it. So when I say people want what they want, and they're going to do anything to keep that palm life, he does it in snow and in Michigan. I find this incredible. And we get pictures like this all the time. Kentucky, I've seen some from Kentucky, Oregon, Washington, but they're outside. And this one was great. So thank you, Bill, for sharing this. But we decided to design a trial for folks who we know they have issues, or we get hit by, we know we have issues with compaction, or they get hit by a freeze. So what can we do to help alleviate some of these manganese deficiencies? So this is my graduate student infectious adjuvant assisted foliar application on manganese uptake in sable minor. We are trying to look at whether manganese applications of foliar spray, with or without the addition of a non-ionic adjuvant, would help, and under 2 different compaction degrees. So we know previous research had actually looked at a dimethyl sulfur oxide penetrant solvent. It did not work. My predecessor found that it absolutely did not work, but there were other manganese products that did increase manganese uptake, but they were at 33% and 30% respectively in those applications. Um, and also Donselman and Brochet found that manganese uptake is strongly temperature dependent. But we use Sable Minor, and this is a greenhouse trial where our applications were, here's our materials. We did a 5% manganese foliar application only. And then we took that manganese application and we mixed it with Enzone, a non-ionic surfactant, um, composed of ethoxylate of phospholipids, oleic acid, and alcohol ethoxylate. We found no phytotoxicity with that, and then mixing it together, no problem. And then, of course, we did manganese only as a soil drench. Now, at the time that we started this trial, which was in November last year, our soil temperatures were very high. Please note that by January and then February, we got hit by the freeze. Our soil temperatures did drop significantly. And you can see this is where the applications were made, where you see the arrows. And yes, I'm no Mother Nature predictor, but this was so opportune, an opportunity we couldn't pass up. Now, I'm showing you this data because I am a surfactant expert. I do not want you to take other adjuvants, surfactants, and mix them because we have studied this for the past 5 years and we know what works and what doesn't work. And this particular surfactant or adjuvant worked very well. We saw no issues. But this doesn't mean that you can take any surfactant and move out there and do this or mix it with manganese. Because there are some surfactants that are not great. But what we found was that when these sable palms, which were in small containers and they were severely compacted, and they've been growing in these small containers, we did significantly increase the amount of manganese, and we want manganese in palms to be right around 50 parts per million. We did significantly increase our manganese uptake, which is great. And manganese only without the surfactant. Also, yes, we see it above that 50 parts per million, but it was not statistically significant when compared to the other treatments. Only the one with adjuvant was. By December, we found that 1 month later, only the manganese plus adjuvant helped the uptake. But that was just enough to give the palm what it needed, and uptake looked great. So it lasted for about 2 months, and these are in compacted arrangements. So it did work in a compacted soil foliar applications where with the drench, it was not different from the control. Then we stepped up these palms. We moved them to 7 gallons. And in January, you see where, in December, you see where the black line is. That's when we stepped them up and we planted them in a Atlas mix. And then you can see where just by taking them out of those containers and putting them in a new one, planting them around and kind of breaking apart the soil a little bit, and then you plant them in the soil, we saw where probably some of the manganese from the adjuvant application was still coming off the leaves and from the drench as well. So we broke that up, and that's where the drench we saw some differences, right? Where the drench did see an increase because we were just breaking up the soil, making it more uptake. And then we applied again beginning or end of January, and we saw statistically insignificantly higher applications with the adjuvant when compared to everything else. And that has lasted. We do have another analysis in April as well, but this is the data that it lasted for over 2 months. So it was not only an increase in manganese uptake, but a longevity. The kicker with applying manganese into soils for uptake post freeze is that manganese can sometimes, if you over apply it, can lead to iron deficiencies. So this is why we want to do the foliar, and we see with an adjuvant, which is counter to what Tim found, but this adjuvant worked very nicely for uptake. We also saw at our present volumetric water content, the higher the number on the left-hand side, the higher the amount of volumetric water content. And we did see where that did increase. And what's unusual for us is we saw where the manganese drench also increased towards the latter part of the study in those newer soils. So we thought, that's interesting. Well, this makes sense to us because we did water drop penetration tests for an evaluation of soil water repellency. And we found that with the manganese, no matter what the application was, drench foliar or with the adjuvant, we did see where it significantly reduced or just lowered your water repellency. And because manganese is a cation, we know cations can reduce soil water repellency. So this is, I believe, one of the first studies that looked at manganese as a use for reducing soil water repellency. This is what the roots look like going from the small container to the top. And then just what we found for this study, because I know a lot of you were looking for options for treating for manganese deficiency post-freeze. This is absolutely an opportunity. We're happy with the results of this study where manganese applied foliar fertilizer with an adjuvant did increase manganese uptake after the freeze. And foliar manganese applications make sense in Florida because of our high pH soils and compacted soils. And then also we found it did reduce soil water repellency. So I don't think we have enough time for anything else, right, Jessica? So I'm right at 11. I took it right up to the edge, right up to the edge.
You have 4 minutes, so if you want to
Okay.
squeeze something in or if you want to take one question.
So I will show you that biochar. We are still working on some results from a biochar study. What I find with soil amendments, and I get asked this all the time, can I use compost and can I use biochar? Uh, Visually, so far we really haven't seen a lot of differences when using biochar and compost. We do see an increase, not all the time, when you use these two components when compared to our 100% sand. So we haven't seen, there's previous research that showed that compost may hurt palms, but because we're using compost that is completely cured, we're not seeing those results. But we do see where it can be beneficial, but visually, you're probably not going to see anything. But more to come on that trial. Thank you to all of my supporters. Thank you. This is my palm nutrition team. And questions.
All
I took
right,
it to the
great.
edge. I took it to the
Yes,
edge.
that was wonderful. So informative. We do have just a few questions. We'll sneak in real quick. What was the percentage of slow release that you were using on those gator grips?
In the gator grips in the trials that I showed you, we were using an 8-2-12-4. The exact percentage, I can't tell you off the top of my head. If you email me, I can get you that information. But we used it like we would, I think we were mimicking what we put on the ground. So we were replacing those gator grips every 3 months. So, and I know we did another trial with gator grips. The reason why I can't remember, we've done so many trials where we looked at an 11 for 11, and I'm not for sure on the amount of slow release. So you can email me and I can get that for you.
Perfect. And have you done any work with spraying silica prior to cold snaps?
Oh, I have not, but I am intrigued by the benefits. We do have some of those applications in other trials. We're exploring it for different things, but not before a cold snap. Um, I know what you're talking about. I've seen some things in turf that are intriguing to us, but we're using it as a plant health benefit. Um, so yes, I am aware of the benefits. And more to come on that. But right now, I can't speak on that. No.
And I know you kind of touched on this, but real quick, can you just kind of give a recommendation for about how far from the trunk of a palm they should be applying fertilizer when they are fertilizing?
Yeah. So if you're using a granular fertilizer, think of it, you just don't want to pile it up like I showed you, right? You want to, if you're looking at a palm frond and that palm frond is 8 feet long, walk out 4 feet and walk around the palm. If you're talking about small palms like Phoenix robelinis, and they're not 8 feet long, but or they're close to the palm, what I want you to do, particularly on transplants, you got to remember that they're the size of that container that you got them from. So that's where, your roots are, but you don't want to pile up the roots. So a nice, even, gentle amount of fertilizer, small amount of fertilizer, like I said, a small cup, or a soup can, walk all the way around that palm, and fertilize it like that, because those roots aren't all the way out here. You're probably fertilizing your turf or other landscape plants, but you want to kind of, if it's a new palm and the roots aren't out and it hasn't been established for a while, but as the palm gets older, you can probably spread that out a little bit more.
Perfect. And one more real quick. Do we have, this is, we'll combine two. As far as native palms go, can you speak a little bit to what those species are and if they need fertilized as regularly or what the fertilizer recommendations for natives are?
Oh, good question. So, like a sable palmetto, obviously, our state tree and our sable palmetto, they're all over the state. One of if you went ahead and looked at people, you can see that a lot of people love sable palmettos. Um, I, I have found where I don't even need to fertilize a sable palmetto. But that is not to say, everybody, that sometimes you don't need to fertilize some of these native species, whether it's a sable palmetto, a needle palm, um, Serenoa repens. Remember our small saw palmettos, and one of my favorite palms is the Pseudophoenix sargentii, which is the oh gosh, the Pseudophoenix sargentii, buccaneer palm. So a native palm, beautiful container palm, but because they're native doesn't mean that they don't sometimes exhibit these nutrient deficiencies. So now you know what these nutrient deficiencies look like. And when you see them, you can say, I maybe just need to add a 0022 or a potassium. You can add a potassium fertilizer during our rainy season and give these palms what they need. Remember, potassium deficiency is always number one for palms. It's more prevalent. So you know what these deficiencies look like. And now looking at ETA stocks, you know how to fertilize for them. So I will say that yes, native species do well here in Florida, but yes, I do see them out in the landscape where they do need a little kicker to help them out.
All right, wonderful. Well, we are at time. There are a few questions we didn't get through. So if you are one of those folks who has a specific question, please feel free to reach out to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program or to Dr. McMillan or even your
Yep.
local extension agents. We're happy to answer those questions. A reminder, if you are looking to get your CEUs, please make sure that you click on that link in the chat and make your payment by the end of the day. We do submit those on Friday, so we need to make sure that that's in. And thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope it was as informative for all of you as it was for me.
Thanks, Jessica. Thank you guys. And happy to answer any questions via email. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.